everyone, Tim Laycock here. Welcome to another recording by members of the William Barnes Society. For the last 3 years, Arts Reach in Dorset have enabled the Ridgeway Singers and Band and members of the Society to put on entertainments to mark the birthday of William Barnes. Typically this takes place in a village hall, and the room is crowded with people keen to hear the dialect poems and celebrate all things Dorset. So here's some of the poems and songs you might hear on a Barnes night. And we thought we'd also take the opportunity to tell the remarkable story of William Barnes. Why did a 19th century schoolmaster choose to write poems in the local dialect? And why are they still such a vibrant part of the culture of the area? We're delighted that Andy Evenen from Keep 106 Community Radio is going to be our storyteller. But first, here's Brian Caddy with a toast to one and all. Praise a Dorset.
We Dorset, though we mid be warmly, bain't ashamed to own our place, and we've some women not uncomely, nor ashamed to show their face. We've a mead or two worth mowing, and an ox or two worth showing. In the village, at the tillage, come along, and you shall find that Dorset men won't shame their kind. Friend and wife, father, mother, sisters, brothers, happy, happy be their life. For Dorset, dear, then gie one cheer. D'ye hear? One cheer. Hip, hip, hip. Hooray!
William Barnes was born in 1801 near Sturminster Newton in the Blackmore Vale. His childhood days were spent in a deeply rural, old-fashioned community where the local dialect was as rich as the soil itself. The places, faces and stories of his youth were later to provide him with a never-ending source of inspiration. And winding through the poems, like a silver seam, is the River Stour.
Pentridge. Oh, my heart's a swellin', full o' joy with folk a tellin' any news of thic wold place, and the boughy hedges round it, and the river that do bound it, wi' his dark but glistening face. For there's no land on either hand to me like Pentridge by the river. Be there any leaves to quiver on the aspen by the river? Do 'e shade the water still, where the rushes be a-growin', where the sullen stowers a-flowin' drew the meads from mill to mill? For if a tree were dear to me, oh, 'twere thick aspen by the river. There, in e-grass now a-shootin', I did run on even vutton, happy over new-mowed land, or did zing wi' zingin' drushes where I platted, out of rushes, little baskets for my hand, beside the cloat that there did float wi' yolla blossoms on the river. Bladed grass is now a-shootin' where the floor were once our vutton, while the hole were still in place. Stwuns be looser in the wallin', holla trees be nearer fallen. Everything have changed its face, but still the name do bide the same. 'Tis Pentridge, Pentridge by the river.
Thanks to Rod Drew for that poem about Barnes's home ground. William's mother, Grace, died when he was 5, and much of his time was spent on the farm of his Aunt Anne and Uncle Charles, who often feature in his poems. He was a delicate child, unsuited to farm work, which would be the natural occupation for most of his contemporaries. But he loved books and learning, and from an early age began to draw, read and write. The grown-ups around him were rather bewildered to find they were rearing up a poet. "Rhyme don't fill the pocket over tight," says Barnes in this next poem, and many poets and writers will agree with him. Here's Devina Symes to read The Young Rymer Snubb'd.
To make up rhymes, my mind was so afire, 'twere idle work to try to keep me quiet. making rhymes my heart did never tire, although I should never be a gainer by it. You make up rhyme, folks said. Why, who would buy it? Could you write fine enough to please a squire? And rhymes what plain folk wouldn't much require. Or you'd find your rhymes would earn but scanty diet. And if I'd any cure for it, I'm sure I'd try it. And father too, in learning new great crammer, said rhyming were a trade but few got fatten, that men wi' names a ringing wi' a clamour did live in holes not fit to put a cat in, and sleep on locks of straw or bits of matting. And mother said she'd sooner hear me stammer than gawk about a gabbling rhymes and Latin. I'd better crack my noddle wi' a patten, she used to say, or cracking wi' a hammer, than filling up wi' rhymes and silly stuff of grammar. My father didn't rhyme me, he knew better. Besides his business and to buy and sell, he only learnt to write a friend a letter that always went a hoping he were well, or in a ledger or a bill to tell for what and when a man became his debtor. And mother too, I never shall forget her, were only just taught to read and spell, and mark a tablecloth or napkin pretty well. And so I find my friends think all the same o' it, that rhyme won't fill the pocket over tight. But then my heart did kindle with the flame o' it, whenever I did see a touching sight, and I did all but lose my wits there right. 'Tis likely I shall make a losing game o' it, but still again to lighten off the blame o' it, for all to keep me poor, it still will bring my heart a pleasure that to leave no sting.
William left school at the age of 13. His first job was as a clerk for Mr. Dashwood, the solicitor, in Vine House, Penny Street, Sturminster. Later he moved to Dorchester to work in a larger office for Thomas Coombs. And in Dorchester, around 1818, he saw his future wife, Julia Miles, getting out of a stagecoach, and resolved there and then to marry her. Julia's father wasn't impressed. He has a large family. William was only 17, and Julia 2 years younger, and Mr. Miles didn't want a penniless clerk marrying one of his daughters. So Barnes had to look for a job with better prospects, and he settled on teaching. He heard of a school that needed a teacher in Mere, and armed with a pile of books, he set off north to start a new career.
How when the old folk went abroad, they thought it fast enough. If 4 good horses beat the road, afore the coach is rough. And there they sat, cold or hot, and rolled along the ground, while the whip did smack on the horse's back, and the wheels went swiftly round. The wheels went swiftly round. No iron rails did streak the land to keep the wheels in track. The coachman turned his four-in-hand out right or left and back. He'd stop before a man's own door to take him up or down, while the reins fell slack on the horse's back till the wheels did rattle round again. The wheels did rattle round. Coach did pass where huffling winds did roar. They'd stop to take a warming glass by the sign above the door. They'd laugh and joke and ask the folk the miles they were from town. till the whip did crack on the horse's back and the wheels did truckle round. The wheels did truckle round. And gaily rode old age or youth when summer light did fall on woods in leaf or trees in bluth or girt folks' parkside wall. They thought they passed the places vast along the dusty ground, when the whip did smack on the horse's back and the wheels spun swiftly round. Them days the wheels spun swiftly round.
Barnes was to be a teacher for most of his adult life. At first, in Mere, he had to do everything. He organised the school and the recruitment of pupils, devised his own lessons on all subjects, and even wrote many of his own textbooks. He proved to be an inspirational teacher, capable of combining hard work with a real vocation for education and learning. Here's Sue Worth to read one of Barnes's poems written in national English, simply called Learning.
Heavenly source of guiltless joy, holy friend through good and ill, when all idle pleasures cloy, thou canst hold my spirit still. Give the idle their delights, wealth unblessed and splendour vain, empty days and sleepless nights, seeming bliss in real pain. Give the sensual their joys, wild excitement, heartless glee, maddening wine and giddy noise, I will spend my hours with thee. Take me to some still abode underneath some woody hill, by some timber-skirted road, by some willow-shaded rill, where along the rocky brook flying echoes sweetly sound, and the hoarsely croaking rook builds upon the trees around. Take me to some lofty room lighted from the western sky, where no glare dispels the gloom till the golden eve is nigh, where the works of searching thought chosen books may still impart what the wise of old have taught, what has tried the meek of heart. Books in long dead tongues that stirred living hearts in other climes, telling to my eyes unheard glorious deeds of olden times. Books that purify the thought, spirits of the learned dead, teachers of the little taught, comforters when friends are fled. Learning, source of guiltless joy, holy friend through good and ill, when all idle pleasures cloy, thou canst hold my spirit still.
Barnes first began to write in the Dorset dialect at Mere. Many of his early works were eclogues, meaning a rustic dialogue, a form that Barnes borrowed from Virgil and brilliantly adapted to the lives and working conditions of the village folk around him. Barnes is sometimes accused of romanticising country life and seeing only the sunny side. But here in the eclogues, the real problems of enclosure, rural poverty, and the difficulties of daily existence come vividly to life. In The Commons are Took In, the loss of grazing rights due to enclosure is plain to see. It has a disastrous effect on their ability to make ends meet.
Good morning to you, John. How be? How be? So you be going to market, I to see. Why, you be quite a-loaded with your geese.
East, Thomas, east. Why, I'm a-getting rid of every goose and gosling I've a-got. And what is worse, I fear I must sell my little cow.
Oh, How so then, John? Why, what's the matter now? Why can't he get along? Be ye run aground, and can't pay 20 shillings for a pound? What, can't you put a loaf on shelf?
East no, but I'd a fear I shan't without my cow. No, they'd a mean to take the moor in, I'd a hear, and 'twill soon be begun upon. So I must sell my bit of stock to yer because there won't have any ground to run upon.
Why, what do you tell o? I be very sorry to hear what they be going about. But yet I suppose there'll be allotment for 'ee when they do come to mark it out.
No, not for me, I fear. And if there should, why, 'twouldn't be so handy as 'tis now. For 'tis the common that to do me good, the run for my few geese and for my cow.
Aye, that's the job. Why, 'tis a handy thing to have a bit of common, I dunno. To put a little cow upon in spring, the while one's bit of orchard grass to grow.
Aye, that's the thing, you see. Now I'd a mow my bit of grass and make a little rick. And in the summer, while to grow, my cow to run out in common for to pick a blade or two of grass if she can find 'em. For t'other cattle don't leave much behind 'em. So in the evening we'd a put a lock of nice fresh grass afore the wicket, and she'd a come at 5 or 6 o'clock, as constant as the sun, to pick it. And then beside the cow, why, we'd a let our geese run out among them at hills. And then, when we'd a pluck 'em, we'd a get for sale some feathers and some quills. And in the winter we'd a fat 'em well and car 'em to the market to sell to gentlefolks, for we don't half afford to put a goose atop of our board. But we'd a get our feast, for we be able to clap the giblets up atop a table.
And I don't know of many better things than geese's heads and gizzards, lags and wings.
And then, when I have nothing else to do, why, I can take my hook and gloves and go to cut a lot of fuzz and briars for hetting ovens or for lighting fires. And when the children be too young to earn a penny, they can go out in sunny weather and run about and get together a bag of cow dung for to burn.
'Tis handy to live near a common, but I've a zeed and I've a zaid that if a poor man got a bit of braid, they'll try to take it from him. But I were told back t'other day that they be got into a way of letting bits of ground out to the poor.
Well, I hope 'tis true, I'm sure, and I'd a hope they will do it yer, or I must go to workhouse, I'd a fear.
The eclogues and later poems were published in the Dorset County Chronicle, and at first the readers assumed they were comic poems because they were written in broad Dorset. But Barnes had a more serious purpose. He wanted to celebrate the distinctive speech of his native county, and his linguistic studies showed him that the words and phrases used by the local working community had roots in the language of the Anglo-Saxons, who had settled in Dorset and Somerset 1,000 years before. So in the everyday talk and homely tales of the Dorset folk, he heard the echoes of King Alfred and the first inhabitants of Wessex. Here now is a lovely story of a dog and his master, called The Dog Wi' Me. A young man goes to visit his sweetheart, and is anxious to linger in the lady's house. But the dog is keen to get back to the rabbit holes in the wood.
I then, as I did straggle out to your house, oh, how glad the dog wi' low-set nose did nimbly jog along the path and hunt about. And his main pleasure were to run along by boughs on timbered brows, and ended where my own begun, at your wood door and stone and floor. And there we time a-gliding by, we me so quick, we him so slow, how he did look at me and blow from time to time a whining sigh, a meaning, come now, let us go along the knolls wi' rabbit holes. I can't think what you have to do with this young face in this wood place.
Eventually, after a 9-year courtship, Mr. Miles relented, and William and Julia were married on the 19th of July, 1827. Jeane's Wedding Day in Mornen, read by Davina Symes.
At last Jeane came downstairs, a dress with wedding knots upon her breast, a blushing, while a tear did lie upon her burning cheek half dry. And then her Robert, drawing nigh we t'others, took her hand wi' pride, to make her at the church his bride, her wedding day in morning. Wi' little foot and beating heart, she stepped up to the new light cart, and took her bridemaid up to ride along wi' Robert at her side. And uncle's mare looked round wi' pride, to see that, if the cart were full, 'twere Jenny that he had to pull, her wedding day in morning. And aunt and uncle stood stock still, and watched 'em trotting down the hill. And when they turned off out o' ground down into lane, 2 tears run down aunt's face, and uncle, turning round, sighed once, and stumped off wi' his stick, because did touchen to the quick, to part wi' Jeane that morning. Now Jeane's a-gone, Tom muttered, we shall mope like owls athin a tree, for she did set us all agog for fun afore the burning log. And as he sot and talked, the dog put his nose athert his thighs, but couldn't make and turn his eyes. Jeane's wedding day in morning. And then the neighbours round us all by uns and twos begun to call, to meet the young folk, when the mayor mid bring 'em back a married pair. And all 'em said, to Robert share there had a fell the fairest face, and kindest heart in all the place, Jeane's wedding day in morning.
With Julia's help, the school flourished. She proved to be a wonderful administrator and manager of the school, and Barnes was able to concentrate on his teaching and writing. Their time in Mere is remembered fondly in several poems, including perhaps his most famous verse, Linden Lea. Set to music by Ralph Vaughan Williams, the song is sung all over the world. Here's Tim Laycock accompanying himself on the concertina.
Within the woodlands flowery gladed, by the oak tree's mossy mood, the shining grass blades timber shaded now do quiver underfoot, and birds do whistle overhead, and the water's bubbling in its bed. It's there for me, the apple tree do lean down, blowing linden lea. When leaves that lately were a-springing now do fade within the copse, and painted birds do hush their singing up upon the timber tops, and brown leaf fruits a-turning red in cloudless sunshine overhead, with fruit for me. The apple tree do lean down low in linden lea. Let other folk make money faster in the arid dark room towns, for I don't dread a peevish master, though no one to heed my frowns. I be free to go abroad, or take again my homeward road, to where for me the apple tree do lean down low in linden lea.
After 10 years, the Barnes family moved back to Dorchester and opened a school in Derngate Street and later in South Street, which at the time was a smart residential area. For many years, Barnes taught successfully and became a celebrated member of the local community. He wore the old-fashioned style of dress depicted in his statue outside St. Peter's Church and entered into the life of the county town with great enthusiasm. The arrival of the railway in the late 1840s, and the excavations and works required to lay the track and build the stations, was a stimulus both for the creation of the county museum and for Barnes, a new and exciting subject matter for poetry.
I took a flight a while ago along the rails, a stage or two, and while the heavy wheels did spin and rottle wi' a deafening din, in clouds of steam the sweeping train did shoot along the hill-bound plain, as shades of birds in flight do pass below 'em on the sunny grass. And as I zot and looked abroad on lane and land and winding road, the ground a-spread along our flight did flee behind us out of sight, the while the sun, our heavenly guide, did ride on wi' us, side by side. And so, while time from stage to stage to car us on from youth to age, the earthly pleasures we divined be soon a-met and left behind. But God, beholden from above our lowly road, we yearn in love to keep beside us, stage by stage, from birth to youth, from youth to age.
It was about this time that William Barnes befriended Thomas Hardy. Both men shared a deep love of the Dorset countryside and the ways and customs of the local people. Hardy later described his old friend as the most interesting link between the past and present forms of rural life that England possessed. They were both fascinated by folklore and intrigued by the superstitions and beliefs of the older country folk. Hardy's novels often include cunning men and white witches who know about herbs and plants and the natural world, and could predict such unpredictable things as love and the weather. We know that Barnes, as a young boy, had been fascinated by the books on astrology and witchcraft belonging to a neighbour, Jeremy Jenkins, who was reputed to be the local conjurer. Here's Sue Worth to read one of Barnes's most striking descriptive poems, cataloguing the beliefs of his old Bagber neighbours, a witch.
There's thick walled hag, Moll Brown, look, see, just past. I wish the ugly sly old witch would tumble over in the ditch. I wouldn't pull her out, not very fast. No, I don't think she's a bit belied. No, she's a witch, aye, Molly's evil-eyed. For I know a many a writhen blight a cast on folk, by Molly's muttered spite. She did one time a dreadful deal of harm to Farmer Gruff's folk down at Lower Farm. For there, one day they happened to offend her, and not a little to their sorrow, because they wouldn't give or lend her summat she had come to beg or borrow, and so they soon began to find that she had gone and left behind her evil wish that had such power that she did make their milk and ale turn sour, and addle all the eggs their fowl did lay. They couldn't fetch the butter in the churn, and all the cheese began to turn all back again to curds and whey. The little pigs a running with the sow did sicken somehow, nobody no doubt, and fall and turn their snouts towards the sky, and only give one little grunt and die. And all the little ducks and chicken were death struck out in the yard, a picking their bits of food, and fell upon their head, and flapped their little wings, and dropped down dead. They couldn't fatten the calves, they wouldn't thrive, they couldn't save their lambs alive. Their sheep were all a-coated and give no wool. Their horses fell away to skin and bones, and got so weak they couldn't pull a half a peck of stones. The dog got dead alive and drowsy, the cat fell sick and wouldn't mousy, and every time the folk went up to bed, they were a haggard till they were half dead. They used to keep her out of house, 'tis true, and nailed up at the door a horse's shoe. And I've heard the farmer's wife did try to dock a needle or a pin in through her wold, hard, withered skin, and draw her blood a-coming by. But she could never fetch a drop, for pins would ply and needles snap again her skin. And that, in course, did make the hag bewitch 'em worse.
Although we often recognise the types in Barnes's wonderfully colourful descriptions of country characters, we don't usually know their actual identity. But in the case of one of Barnes's most popular poems, we certainly do. John Bloom in Lon'on was inspired by a meeting between William, Julia and their 2 daughters and an old friend from the Blackmore Vale at the Great Exhibition in London in June 1851. The subject of the poem is Job Rose, the 20-stone miller from Woodbridge Mill near Fontmell Magda, who, in his best country corduroys, must have been quite a sight, even amongst the splendours and marvels in the Crystal Palace.
John Bloom, he were a jolly soul, a grinder of the best of meal, beside a river that did roll from week to push his wheel. His flour were all a made of wheat, and fit for bread that folk mid eat, for he would starve afore he'd cheat. "'Tis pure," one woman cried. "Aye, sure," one more replied. "You'll find it nice, buy once, buy twice," cried worthy Bloom the miller. Athert the chest he were so wide as 2 or 3 of me or you, and wider still from side to side, and I'd a think still thicker drew. Fall down he couldn't, he did lie when he were up on side so high as up on end or pretty nigh. "Make room," one neighbour cried. "'Tis Bloom," one more replied. "Good marn to you all, both great and small," cried worthy Bloom the miller. No stings of conscience ever broke his rest a-twitting on way wrong, so he did sleep till morning broke, and birds did callin' with their song. But he did love a harmless joke, and love his evening whiff of smoke, a-sittin' in his chair awoke. "Your cup," his daughter cried. "Filled up," his wife replied. "Aye, aye, a drap afore my nap," cried worthy Bloom the miller. When Lon'on folk did make a show of their girt glass and house one year, and people went both high and low, to see the sight from fur and near. "Oh, well," cried Bloom, "well, I've a right, so well's the rest, to see the sight. I'll go and take the rail outright." "You're fair," the booker cried. "There, there," good Bloom replied. "Why, this June het to make one sweat," cried worthy Bloom the miller. Then up the guard did whistle shrill, and then the engine panked a blast, and rottled on so loud's the mill, afore the train from slow to fast. And oh, at last how they did spank by cutting deep and high cast bank, the while their iron hoss did pank. "Do whizzy," one of 'em cried. "I'm dizzy," one replied. "Aye, here's the road to Hall and Woad," cried worthy Bloom the miller. In Lon'on, John sent out to call a tidy trap, that he mid ride to see the glazen house, and all the lots of things a stowed inside. "Your boots, come here," cried he. "I'll dab a sixpence in your hand, and nab down street a tidy little cab." "A fare," the boots then cried. "I'm there," the man replied. "The glazen place, your quickest pace," cried worthy Bloom the miller. The steps went down wi' rattling slap, the swinging door went open wide. Wide? No, for when the worthy chap stepped up to take his place inside, breast foremost, he were twice too wide for that there door. And then he tried to edge in one and t'other side. "'Twon't do," the driever cried. "Can't go," good Bloom replied. "That you should bring this vutty thing," cried worthy Bloom the miller. "Come," cried the driever, "pay your fare. You'll take up all my time, good man." "Well," answered Bloom, "to make that square, you take up me then, if you can." "I come at call," the man did nod. "What then?" cried Bloom. "I han't a rod, and can't indict their odd my dod." "Girt lump," the driever cried. "Small stump," good Bloom replied. "A little mite to make so light," a jolly Bloom the miller. "You best be off now pretty quick," cried Bloom, "and find a lighter load, or else I'll fetch my foot and kick the footy thing athert the road." "Who is the man?" they cried. "Make room." "A half-starved Dosset man," cried Bloom. "You be?" another cried. "Hee hee," one more replied. "Aye, shrunk so thin to bone and skin," cried worthy Bloom the miller.
1852 was to prove the worst year of Barnes's life. His wife Julia became ill, and after a short illness she died. She was only 48. Barnes lost not only his best friend and soulmate, but also the driving force behind the success of his schools. His personal grief and the practical and financial difficulties that led to the decline of his school combined to create a very dark period in his life. And for 10 years he struggled to keep his school going and his family fed. His desolation is reflected in a series of deeply moving poems.
Since I no more do see your face upstairs or down below, I'll sit me in the lonesome place where flat-bowed beech do grow. Below the beech's bough, my love, where you did never come, and I don't look to meet you now as I do look at home. Since you no more be at my side in walks in summer hat, I'll go alone where mist do bite through trees a-dripping wet. Below the rain-wet bough, my love, where you did never come, and and I don't grieve to miss you now, as I do grieve at home. Since now beside my dinner board your voice do never sound, I'll eat the bit I can afford, afield upon the ground. Below the darksome bough, my love, where you did never dine, and I don't grieve to miss you now, as I at home do pine. Since you no more be at my side in prayer at eventide, I'll pray with one sad voice for grace to go where you do bide. Above the trees and bough, my love, where you be gone afore, and be a-waiting for me now to come forevermore.
The next poem, Woak Hill, is one of the greatest poems in the English language. The story that gradually unfolds is of a grieving husband leaving for the last time the home that he has shared for many years with a wife who has recently died. Unwilling to leave all memory of her behind in the old home, in his mind he takes her with him away from Woak Hill to the new house.
When sycamore leaves were a-spreadin' green ruddy in hedges, beside the red doust o' the ridges a-dried at Woak Hill, I packed up my goods all a-sheenin' wi' long years o' handlin', on dousty red wheels of a wagon, to ride at Woak Hill. The brown thatchin' roof o' the dwellin' I then were a-leavin' had sheltered the sleek head o' Mary, my bride, at Woak Hill. But now for some years her light footfalls a-lost from the floorin'. Too soon for my Jai and my children, she died at Woak Hill. But still I do think that in soul she do hover about us, to hoe for her motherless children, her pride at Woak Hill. So, lest she should tell me hereafter I stole off without her, and left her uncalled at house-ridden to bide at Woak Hill, I called her so fondly with lippins all soundless to others, and took her wi' e'er-reach in hand to my side at Woak Hill. On the road I did look round a-talking to light at my shoulder, and then let her in at the doorway miles wide from Woak Hill. And that's why folk thought, for a season, my mind were a-wandering wi' sorrow when I were so sorely a-tried at Woak Hill. But no, that my Mary mid never behold herself slighted, I wanted to think that I guided my guide from Woak Hill.
In 1862, our story takes a happier turn. William Barnes had for several years acted as curate and occasional preacher at Whitcombe and Winterbourne Came, and now the living became vacant, and he was offered the job. He happily gave up his school and moved to the lovely old thatched rectory that can still be glimpsed through the trees on the Broadmain Road out of Dorchester. Here the poet found peace and tranquillity, and happily devoted himself to his family, his books, looking after the needs of his small congregations, and entertaining close friends who called at the house. Barnes's dialect poetry had become very popular, and his reputation as a poet with a distinctive local voice spread far afield. He was visited by several illustrious writers, including Alfred Lord Tennyson and the diarist Francis Kilvert, who was deeply impressed when he met Barnes in 1874, describing him as the great idyllic poet of England, half hermit, half enchanter. William Barnes died in the rectory at Winterbourne Came in October 1886. Since that time, his poetry has become a treasured part of the literature and folk culture of Dorset, cherished by lovers of the county all over the world. It's not surprising. Barnes's poetry at its best evokes the timeless and lasting qualities of country life. Even though the tiny farmsteads and the old-fashioned farming methods that he describes have largely disappeared, the essential rural nature of the place and close connection to the natural world remains. Barnes's understanding of the healing power of the landscape and the compassion and humanity that runs through his verse are qualities that perhaps we need now more than ever. Our last spoken poem, a perfect evocation of the end of the day in a small community somewhere in the Blackmore Vale.
Now the light o' the west is a turn to gloom, and the men be won from ground, and the bells be ascending all down the coombe from tower, their monsome sound, and the wind is still, and the house dogs do bark, and the rooks be afled to the elms high and dark, and the water do roar at mill.
And the flickering light through the window pane from the candle's dull flame do shoot, and young Jemmy the smith has a-gone down lane a-playing his shrill-voiced flute, and the miller's man does sit down at his ease on the seat that is under the cluster of trees, wi' his pipe and his cider can.
We hope you've enjoyed hearing about the life of William Barnes and this selection from the many hundreds of Dorset poems that he wrote. We'd like to thank Andy Venton for narrating the programme. Thanks, Andy. Thanks also to our readers and performers, the Ridgeway Band, Devina Symes, Sue Worth, John Blackmore, Brian Caddy, Tim Laycock and Rod Drew. The programme was recorded and edited by Andy Worth for Keep 106 Community Radio. And we're also grateful to Mark North for once again providing the lovely images to accompany the programme online. And now, here's a final word from Brian Caddy.
Thanks for listening, and we look forward to welcoming you in person to a William Barnes Society meeting later in 2021. And do look out for a Barnes Night somewhere in Dorset in 2022. To end our programme, here's John Blackmore to sing us out with his beautiful setting of Barnes's last poem, The Gate a Fallen To.
In the sunshine of our summers, with the hay time now come, how busy were we out afield, with fewer left at home, when wagons rumbled out of yard, red-wheeled with body blue, and back behind them loudly slammed the gate a fallen to. Through day sheen of how many years the gate hath now swung, behind the feet of full-grown men and footsteps of the young. Through years of days it swung to us, behind each little shoe, as we tripped lightly on afore, the gate a fallen to. In evening time of starry night, how mother sat at home and kept her blazing fire bright till father should have come, and how she quickened up and smiled and stirred her fire anew, to hear the tramping horses' steps and gate a fallen to. There's moonshine now in nights of fall, when leaves be brown from green, when to the slamming of the gate our Jenny's ears be keen, when the old dog do wag his tail and Jane could tell to who, as he do come in through the gate a fallen to. And oft do come a saddened hour, when there must go away one well-beloved to our heart's core, for long, perhaps for aye. And oh, it is a touching thing, the loving heart must rue, to hear behind his last farewell the gate a fallen to.
Keep 106 is a community radio station, and we like to reflect the things that our listeners like and enjoy. If you have a story about the heritage of Dorchester or your own recollections about our amazing county town, then let us know about them by using the contact page on our website, keep106.com.